I love the anime My Dress Up Darling. I think it is one of the best entries into the romance genre and just a fantastic, near flawless anime overall. A true testament to the skill and talent that Fukuda possesses. However, for every person like me who loves the series, there seems to be someone who hates it in equal proportion. Some going so far as to say that it should never have been created because it violates some sort of taboo. And there are many attempted justifications for this position. Now, My Dress Up Darling is not just one of my favorite romance anime, it is also one of my favorite anime of all time. I don't quite remember exactly how it was that it went, but it might have been something along the lines of love at first sight. And what can I say, the anime oozed passion and love out of every pore of its being. It was something that was just on a completely different level from a lot of the other things that I had watched. Storytelling, characters, animation, humor, all of it was just utterly phenomenal, to the point where I actually made this one of the very first mangas I acquired for my collection. And it really seems like I wasn't the only one who felt this passionate about it, because the response for the first season was, according to various internet rumor mills, enough to coax Cloverworks into making a second season that they hadn't actually planned on doing. So now for the uninitiated, My Dress Up Darling is the story of Wakana Gojo, a shy young man reserving himself to relative obscurity so that he can focus on his passion of making Hina dolls in peace. It isn't that he hates people or that he particularly wants to be alone, just that he doesn't know how they'll feel about him and his hobby and fears their rejection. But a fateful meeting with the school's most popular Gyaru, Marin Kitagawa, is just what he needed to shake up his whole life. By sheer coincidence, Marin happens upon Gojo while he's working on Hina doll in their school's home ec room. And as Gojo is beginning to panic as he thinks his quiet life is about to be thrown into chaos because of this discovery, Marin does something he never would have expected. She takes a genuine interest in what he's doing and even has admiration for him because of it. This, of course, is partly because Marin has been doing a bit of a project of her own, a cosplay of one of her favorite characters named Shizuku. And it's not going well because she's not used to operating a sewing machine, as well as the fact that she kinda sucks in the homemaking department. And that is how this dynamic cosplay duo begin working together. After a harsh critique of her work, Gojo takes up designing and making the outfit for his new acquaintance, while Marin handles any monetary issues since she has an actual job as a model. From there, the two continue to grow closer, forming a strong relationship over the cosplays they've done, as well as the fact that Marin is just a beautiful person right down to her soul. For Marin, though, her feelings pretty quickly go deeper than just friendship, and she soon realizes that she's fallen head over heels for someone who is practically her opposite. Meanwhile, you have Gojo slowly opening himself up as he finds a very enthusiastic and supportive friend in Marin. And as Gojo slowly moves away from being the timid and insecure person hiding his passions from everyone, Marin only seems to fall deeper and deeper in love with this guy and begins to struggle with how she's actually going to convey her feelings to him. Like I said, season 1 of this anime was undoubtedly phenomenal. The characters were amazingly written. They felt so alive and endearing. And whether relatable or just enjoyable to have around on screen, there was never a point at which I was convinced a character just didn't belong or that the story would have been better without that character. Even the ones who were very shallow and transient and only there for the sake of the plot. Marin's friends and even unimportant side characters seemed to get plenty of love from the people working on the anime. Ironically enough, the lewd cosplay-themed story and generous helping of fan service was combined with a very pure and innocent love story. It isn't exactly something you would expect out of a show like this, where it seems that sexy cosplays are the norm, but the fact is that both Marin and Gojo are fairly inexperienced in the realm of love. It occupies a very similar place to Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai in that regard, where the surface level look at the series would convince you that the show was less pure than it actually is, while the fan service element is a total Trojan horse for the very skillfully written plot. So in almost typical romance anime fashion, this story is actually pretty wholesome. It takes a little while for the characters to get together, and they aren't doing anything too crazy. While Marin may have some rather appealing cosplays, it does a good job of framing her as someone who doesn't simply throw herself out there for anyone to get. She doesn't behave like, and do pardon this description, it's just the best way to do it. a slut or an easy woman who's just out to get some from anyone she can. She's almost as innocent as they come in terms of that kind of intimacy, to the point where even the idea of Gojo potentially coming onto her sort of gets her really freaked out. To add on to that, it isn't like the very reserved and traditional Gojo is going to be getting up to anything either. He's so conscious of how he behaves around women that he refuses to even sleep over at Marin's house. So season 1 was a very good mix of both very sweet and well-written moments, and hilarious hijinks playing off the differences in the personalities of its two core characters, as well as the nature of Marin's many fascinations. All of these elements combined with the fantastic animation that Cloverworks put into it, and it was a one-of-a-kind experience with a romance anime that had just about everything that I could have wanted at the time. This anime was, without a doubt in my mind, a masterful creation. And that's why it made its way all the way to my top 10 in both manga and anime form. However, not everyone seems to agree with my assessment of the show. Shocking, I know. My opinions are always objectively correct. I am never wrong, and you should absolutely believe everything I say 100% because it is correct. Any anime as popular as My Dress-Up Darling is bound to have those who vocally dislike it, whether that be purely out of some legitimate issue of taste, banal contrarianism, or abject stupidity. So this one has its fair shares of criticisms that you will find if you spend enough time in anime circles on the internet, and I like to divide those into two categories. Benign criticisms that really often just boil down to a matter of taste, and with which I can engage in good faith. And malicious criticisms, which are often either illogical, complete misunderstandings of something within the series, or done in complete bad faith. So let's talk about that first category, because it allows me to talk about Season 2, and then move into the second category, where I will lambaste a bunch of people, for various reasons.
It's a fact. Everyone with a pulse loves a bunny.
Propagators of the first category of criticisms are almost always people acting in good faith and taking a critical lens to what they've been watching. They have a discerning taste to be able to describe what it is that they do or don't like about a show, even if that puts them in an unpopular place with others. I know a few of these types. One is a creator friend of mine who joins me on stream every so often to talk anime, and another is a regular member of my live stream chats. The big criticism in this category, and really the only one that I have seen thus far, is that Season 2 did not live up to what Season 1 gave us. And to be fair, I can pretty well understand this sentiment, and there are several reasons why I feel like this criticism can get a pass as benign, even if I do disagree with it. Let's call this the Vinland effect. When a series with a deeper theme than what the surface level viewer will be able to connect with on first view changes pace to tackle its theme in a more targeted fashion, and the fandom, who came in for that surface level element, doesn't receive it as well as the previous installments. And yes, I am of course referring to the infamous Season 2 of Vinland Saga with this. We find ourselves in a similar situation with My Dress-Up Darling Season 2. Vinland Saga gained semi-mainstream popularity, don't quote me on that, for its first season of intense action and fighting. It's pretty easy to get popular when that's what you do. Most normies don't engage much deeper than the general entertainment level of a series, and there's not inherently a problem with that. That's not what I'm saying. However, as a series, Vinland Saga was a bit more than just war and fighting. So when Season 2 came around, I noticed that one of my close friends who had previously sung the praises of the series to the high heavens was no longer talking about it. Meanwhile, people who were huge fans of the series, who had taken to the themes that it was presenting, really liked Season 2. But the reason my first friend didn't like it was because the show changed pace and stepped away from the action-heavy first season that he had grown attached to. He was generally in that normie category, the person who was looking for the surface-level entertainment. Even though the core identity of the series hadn't actually changed, and it still carried the same story and messages of the first season, the flashy and easy-to-consume surface level was a completely different product. I say all that because similar things have happened with My Dress-Up Darling Season 2. When it does something similar, it can be a bit off-putting to people who enjoyed Season 1 for elements that aren't as prevalent in Season 2. In My Dress-Up Darling Season 1, the show was pretty liberal with the fan service shots, and it focused very heavily on Marin and Gojo's budding relationship. But Season 2 sells a bit of a different product. It broadens the cast out, focuses less on Gojo and Marin by proxy, and is pretty tame in terms of fan service as the cosplays are relatively conservative compared to the rest of the series. So the people who had come from a previously sexy cute cosplay rom-com were given something kinda different than what they wanted. And this touches on something I have been taking note of this last couple of seasons. Sometimes too much hype is actually a bad thing. I noticed that a lot of people who really loved Season 2 were people that had read this section of the manga before, while people who generally weren't as much of a fan of it hadn't. Manga readers knew what was coming, and had realistic expectations of what would become of this season. Anime-onlys, on the other hand, caught a wave of hype, and more likely than not got the wrong idea about what could potentially come next with this show, as I suspect in the case of my two friends that I have mentioned. So when Season 2 of the anime went into the part of the story where it takes on its core theme more directly, manga readers were happy while some of the others weren't left as satisfied as us. The core element of what makes My Dress Up Darling a work of art is its theme about not trying to censor yourself, or the things you love just because others say you should, or because you fear rejection. It is a story about being true to yourself and your passions. Gojo is someone who was deeply hurt when he was a kid because his childhood friend insulted his love of Hina dolls. She called him creepy, and that was basically the end of that relationship. It seems childish, but they were children. Because of this, he kind of becomes paranoid about how people view him. He doesn't want to relive that scenario, so he keeps all of his passion to himself and never really opens up to anyone. At least, until a certain blabbering Gyaru happens to start oversharing her passion for porn games.
Nope, I take it all back. Kitagawa isn't joking in the slightest.
But once you get to the end of that route, it's
I mean, look at her eyes.
Marin is the very first person in Gojo's life in a long time to have any positive outlook on what he loves to do. Much less one as overwhelmingly supportive as Marin is when she finds out. In all of the lewdness that this first season presents, and in all of the nerdiness that Marin exhibits, the series is saying that it is okay to love things. And that looking down on the hobbies or passions of another, the way many do to nerd hobbies like gaming, anime, and so forth, should be fairly frowned upon itself. This is more directly tackled with Season 2, as you're exposed to a wider cast that Gojo begins to have contact with. It starts with just the Halloween party, where Gojo tags along with Marin and friends to karaoke. Karaoke. I don't know why my hillbilly ass always pronounced it karaoke. There, the cat gets out of the bag that Gojo does Marin's makeup, and the group just generally accepts that after one dude is initially shocked by this revelation, only to sort of get hit with some facts and logics. Thus marking the beginning of the realization that there are people outside of just Marin who won't judge him. But the biggest player in this department is the school festival, where Gojo's secrets get out to his whole class. Having viewed himself as an outsider this whole time, when it comes time for the cultural festival, he is anxious about what he can actually do to help. But someone spills the fact that Gojo makes Marin's cosplays, and that sends the whole class into an uproar. In a good way. The idea is met with a lot of praise, and even everyone cheering Gojo on to do his best for the cultural festival. Suddenly, the things he was so scared to share with everyone else have made him the class's hero. And when he tries to take on too much work because he's afraid of being ostracized again for not helping, the whole class tells him that his talent is needed to be focused solely on Marin's outfit, and that he definitely shouldn't be letting her go shopping on her own. So this first part of Season 2 is really focused on Gojo receiving widespread support for the talent and passion he thought previously he needed to hide. You know, as someone who went through a bit of a phase similar to this myself, it resonates with me. I won't say I was ever bullied or had any trauma over it, it's not that bad. But I did struggle with being an outspoken nerd for a long time because I was afraid of what people would think. I'm not like those other guys. You know, the full-time hammer-swinging carpenter who listens to bands like Demon Hunter or Beartooth on the job site daily isn't exactly the person you would think collects all kinds of manga and figurines and watches a ton of slice-of-life and romance anime. You'd probably expect the guy shouldering 300 pounds of treated lumber to fix your leaking roof would be into sports or something society would consider more masculine, like hunting or I don't know. But no, it seems pretty contradictory. So in my college years, as I was, just getting out of the house and into the broader world, it wasn't the easiest thing for me to talk about. That said, Gojo's story is something I can feel on a personal level. And looking at this whole section of the series in this much depth has allowed me to truly appreciate what it is that this show is saying. Season 2 needed to open Gojo's world more. He needed to broaden the support of his class, or else he might only have ever clung to Maureen for the support she gave him. And I'd argue that this would have made certain events that happen later in the series not work as well, or even contradict Gojo's character. But I will remain manga spoilers free, so fret not. In terms of storytelling, this marks a milestone in Gojo's journey, as he is now able to hold a more normal life he had originally thought would require him to stifle himself. He's finally starting to be free of the shackles of his own paranoia about how other people perceive him. And then we get to several tangentially related themes that fall under this umbrella of staying true to who you are, and that culminate in the final leg of the story that I will not spoil for anyone. Shortly after the Halloween party, and before you get to the school festival, you meet the cosplayer Amane, a cross-dresser who struggled with relationships because of his hobby of cosplaying magical girls and idol characters. He also mirrors Gojo's story pretty well in how his hobby puts kinks in his relationships and how some people judged him for what he did, though Amane is more assertive than Gojo ever was and tells his haters to get lost. Later on in the season, you get to the coffin cosplay arc, where you meet the infamous Akira, who was forced by her parents to abandon her hobbies because they were deemed childish. This is coupled with Juju making her return here as well to help cover this idea, since she is considering giving up on childish things she likes once she turns 18, only to be encouraged to not give up the hobbies that she loves by the adult women around her who also love to cosplay, insisting that it's actually more fun to do as an adult. My Dress Up Darling is a very deep story once you sit down to think about it. One that says that having fun or having passion for something is not something that you should be ashamed of, even if it is considered childish or weird. It's okay to be weird. Embrace your cringe. It's okay to like childish things. Growing up is overrated anyway. All this to say that My Dress Up Darling Season 2 is very much in line with the core part of the series. It is faithful to what the show wanted to convey, but it lacks a lot of the focus and fan service that Season 1 presented. On the fan service end, you really only have two major moments where it stands out. The bunny girl cosplay and then the sleepover. But this drop in fan service content kind of coincides with Maureen becoming more and more reserved around Gojo as she tries to work up the courage to confess her feelings to him. She becomes a bit more conscious of how she acts and dresses around him as she falls deeper in love with him, and that makes it hard for her to convey her feelings or to get him to notice her. But that is more of a subtle observation I picked up. What really matters here is that Season 2 appears different on the surface level, but very much carries with it the heart and soul of the series. And I think that because they didn't have the same expectations as manga readers, anime-onlys like the friends that I started out talking about were more susceptible to being thrown off by Season 2. And like I said, I won't judge those friends of mine or the people who are viewing this for having preferences of their own. And I only really bring them up in here just so that those of you who may not have enjoyed Season 2 as much as manga readers don't feel like you're the only ones out there or that you have to hide your opinion or something. I think it is a valid way to feel about it depending on what you expected out of this season. I have no problem with people thinking that it didn't focus on Maureen or Gojo enough. I have no problem with people missing the fan service elements, and I don't judge people for thinking the cosplays weren't as good this season. I think those are issues of taste. They are opinions that I can respectfully engage with because I can engage with them in good faith, knowing that I can have a good back and forth about it and not sling mud at the other person. That's why I refer to them as benign criticisms. You're not really doing any harm by making a statement of taste. It is simply engaging with the series with some level of criticality and having personal preferences in fiction. All of that is fine. In fact, it should be very normal to be able to express your own tastes on something, to be able to look at something even if you love it, and be fairly objective in your reaction to it. I wish I could say the same about the next category.
What part are you on?
The one where he's up in front of the whole school at the morning assembly and can't stop ejaculating? I can't even
What
imagine.
in the actual hell?
The malicious criticisms category consists largely of politically or morally motivated attacks on this series, often by people with some sort of moral or political impetus to do so. Oftentimes, they don't just take issue with the element that they do not like, but with their very creation. So it isn't just the fact that something is, but that it could ever be made. And that is where you get to the pearl clutching over how Maureen herself is depicted throughout this story that is so indicative of tourists and propagandists within the anime community. There's this idea going around lately, that somehow or another, any female character that appeals to the male gaze is inherently bad. It's been particularly funny as I've been writing this that Demon Slayer fans trying to argue that their women are better written than the women of Chainsaw Man completely ignore everything that is to do with writing. It's also tremendously funny to me that they will conveniently ignore or dance around the various women throughout Demon Slayer who are mainly remembered for their big titties or having a certain Hashira for a shared husband. But those topics are entirely beside the point. Those groups can argue for all I care. I'm not concerned about them right now. It just ties into one of the big malicious criticisms of My Dress-Up Darling, and that is, it is somehow oppressive to women because it presents Maureen as a very physically attractive character who isn't shy about her body.
So that's what you're worried about. Yeah, no problem.
Hey, let's not be too hasty.
Ta-da! I wore a bathing suit.
And there are plenty of reasons why her not being shy about it absolutely would be the case for her character. The issue is that the sexualization of female characters is not indicative of whether or not they are good characters. My evidence? One of the most iconic anime women out there, Faye Valentine. I don't think you can argue that Faye isn't sexualized. I also don't think you can argue that she isn't a well-written character. At the same time, you can find plenty of very bland, uninteresting characters who aren't sexualized. And you can also find the other two categories in here. Good characters who aren't sexualized, and bad characters who are sexualized. The only thing that makes a character good or bad is the talent involved in their creation. A good writer will create compelling characters regardless of how they dress or act or present themselves. You not liking any of those things because of your already held beliefs does not make the character inherently bad. It's kind of ironic that a lot of people who complain about how Maureen needs to be rescued from her own series end up doing the very same thing to her that they're trying to say everyone else does, or that the writer does, making her nothing but a sex object. Maureen as a character has a vivid and lovable personality, as well as plenty of reasons she wouldn't have a problem showing skin. Namely the fact that she's a model and has likely done swimsuit shots over her career. To completely ignore everything that makes up her character and hyper-focus on the one element you think is bad by making it seem like a separate and completely unrelated issue, you have done more harm to the character than anyone who has been accused of making her quote-unquote too sexual. What really matters to this story is that she is a great person. And best of all, everyone's favorite, a strong female character, one who holds beliefs that she will fight you over. And to say all of this is bad writing just because she likes sexy cosplays or is comfortable in revealing outfits is the most shallow, surface-level take you could have about the series and the character. You have unironically told on yourself in saying that you are so focused on the sex part that you have forgotten everything else. And I won't be pinning this criticism to one side of the political horseshoe, because it comes from both. On one end, you have very left-leaning feminist types who loathe anything that men enjoy, insisting that the idea of having a beautiful and lovable female character is the epitome of misogyny and sexism. On the other hand, you have the ultra-conservative and often very religious Philistines who go so far as to say even the merest showing of an ankle is porn, and might just cause the next mass shooting. Some way, somehow, two polar opposites manage to come to the exact same dumb conclusion by focusing entirely on a single element of a character and ignoring everything else. They refuse to take the whole picture in, missing the forest for the trees. So while the right lumps in a girl in a bikini with hardcore porn and calls for a ban that will ultimately erode civil liberties just by its imposition, the left screeches about how any and all appealing designs are bad because they objectify women, and that is the greatest of all sins, the ultimate taboo. Apparently to them, in order to truly be a well-written character, you must never show a hint of beauty. You must be defiant in the face of the male gaze, or completely submissive to your husband and not have any rights, in order to be an actual woman. As if women don't like beautiful characters as well, as if women can't do things on their own. This whole line of logic dissolves into various cope arguments that are near equivalent to unfalsifiable boogeyman beliefs when you point out that the creator of My Dress-Up Darling is a woman herself. I've seen people go so far as to say that women can write sexy characters and enjoy them, but it's still sexist when it does harm to women. which then begs the question of what makes it harmful to women for a woman to create a beautiful woman. And it always comes right back around to the ideal of if it appeals to a male audience. This is quite literally the internalized misogyny argument in a nutshell. A boogeyman argument that can only be defined by how the person making it feels about a topic. Do they not like the fact that men like the female character? Internalized misogyny. Is it something that men generally don't care about? Alright, it's cool. We can move on. To them, the only reason Fukuda wrote Maureen this way was to appeal to men to get them to read the series. On what is this argument based? The fact that male fans like Maureen, as if there is no other reason for a male audience to like her. It's not like she has a great personality. It's not like she is a good human being. Are we forgetting again that this character has so many positive qualities that are only complemented by her beauty? So beautiful women are okay so long as men don't like them. And female characters are fantastic so long as they don't show any hint of sexuality ever. Honestly, the irony in this thinking is thick enough I could probably spread it over my morning toast like butter. Not only have you now assumed that the only relevant and likable element of a character is her body, but it often comes from people who would scream to the high heavens the rights of women to objectify themselves on platforms like Pornhub and OnlyFans, which commoditize women for men to consume like products. So it really does come down to just not liking that fictional women appeal to guys more than your mid-OF account. When put under the microscope, the left-wing version of this literally comes down to I hate men, and the right-wing version of this literally comes down to I hate women. They'll tell you to stop treating characters like sex objects, conveniently ignoring the fact that the character has much more to them than just their eye-catching element, and go about their merry days acting like it's empowering to sell your body on the internet. Maureen would be just as well written without the fan service as with it. Though, in this case, the anime as a whole would lose some of the important elements to its message. The bottom line is that it's entirely okay for female characters to be appealing to anyone. It isn't inherently sexist. It isn't some great moral sin. In fact, it's very rarely sexist in spite of many claims that it is. And this idea that just because someone looks good, they are objectified and are therefore a bad character is so laughably wrong you can debunk it with a peripheral knowledge of pop culture. But that's small potatoes. By far the most irritating criticism of My Dress Up Darling is likening it to pedophilia, or its viewers to pedophiles. This is by far the most malicious and most dangerous criticism you can level at the series. Half the reason so many people view My Dress Up Darling as problematic is because the two main characters are in high school. That's where you get a lot of the criticism from, because Maureen isn't exactly shy about her appearance. Again, likely due to her modeling job and overall innocence. And only becomes more conservative in the way she dresses as she falls deeper in love with Gojo and becomes more and more conscious of how she behaves around him. I think one of the issues people have in this department is their inability to separate fiction from reality, and more so their inability to evaluate something thoroughly. To take it as a whole, rather than hyper-focusing one specific thing. It's the same core issue stated in my rebuttal of the previous criticism in this category. You reduce an entire complex work of fiction into one thing, ripping any sort of message out of it that would add context to the situation, and then put the elements that make you feel justified in your claim on full display without any sort of consideration for the larger work. And this has happened to many series, Mushoku Tensei, with the debate around Rudy and some of the other things that happen in that series, with Frieren and the whole demon debate, which completely misses everything that is going on with that series. And there are probably many more that you can lump in here. Ultimately, it becomes this weird idea that because you consume something in fiction, you must in some way have that desire for the real world. Like, if you play Battlefield, you must love violence. The argument is always as simple as that. If consuming fan service heavy material is gonna make you want to go touch real people, or that consuming My Dress Up Darling is gonna make you want to get at a real teenager, then why do we as a society have no problem with exposing children to hyper-violent media all the time? They're arguably far more susceptible to this normalization effect that everyone goes on about, since they're young and impressionable. Yet, when I went to see Demon Slayer, the movie, I was genuinely surprised by the number of people who went in with their own small children. If what you say about fan service in My Dress Up Darling is true, then we should be pretty concerned about the culture that turns out as much violent content as ours because we're effectively mass-producing little sociopaths. More concerningly, a lot of this kind of commentary on any anime comes from people who don't actually know much about the medium that they're interacting with, or whose primary lens of anything is their own existing politics. Oftentimes, they're people who spent decades consuming the medium only to come to the conclusion that, oh wow, this is bad, this is rampant throughout the series, but because I acknowledge it, it's okay for me to consume it. Yeah, try that one in court, you fucker. And I mean, if we're about to be upset over My Dress Up Darling, you can point out the exact kind of thing in Dragon Ball, with its early depictions of Bulma fully in the nude, not to mention all the other times Toriyama added characters in suggestive clothing. Yet nobody complains about it because this is the GOAT Toriyama, who would never do it, but when he actually does, it's just a joke, okay? So leave it alone, don't think about it. And the same can be said of another manga legend, Kentaro Miura, and his depictions of Guts' early life, as well as Shirk later on in the story, and any number of younger female characters he portrayed, which can be pretty brutally graphic at times. Not to mention his other series, Gigantomachia, or his obsession with the game Idolmaster. If you want to accuse someone of having the desire for children because they watch My Dress Up Darling, then can't the same be said of popular shonen titles that regularly put their underage characters in suggestive situations? This unfounded idea that your taste in fiction is somehow indicative of your morals or that it can predict your behavior is based on the faulty belief that fiction affects reality. While to some extent it can affect reality, I'll give that caveat, particularly in the case of people with mental health issues that prevent them from seeing the lines between reality and fiction, or the aforementioned impressionable young children whose minds are not developed enough to parse through everything or take in information without being affected by it. For most people, it has little to no effect. Getting someone to do something totally against their morals or against their standard of society is not nearly as easy as just watching an anime. The CIA has already tried to create brainwashed soldiers with LSD in any number of methods, and the best result that they could achieve was Charles Manson. But to the credit of some, there are cases where the deranged take fiction too seriously. A good example was the Slender Man stabbings, where two girls, both suffering from mental issues, attempted to sacrifice their friend to Slender Man because they struggled to separate fiction from reality and mistakenly believed that if they killed the poor girl, they would be taken to Slender Man's mansion and made his disciples. But when it comes to healthy, normal people, you can't say the same. You would have to go to extreme measures to get any meaningful results. And the best you could do with hobbyist consumption levels would be to exert a small influence on someone's life. Like when a story or character helps someone find direction in life or resolution to a personal struggle. I've already mentioned some of how My Dress Up Darling has swayed my life. ReZero had a notable effect on my life when I was in college, when I went through some of the same identity crises and self-worth issues that Subaru Natsuki struggled with. I know people who have had their lives turned around by Mushoku Tensei. And the same can be said of My Dress Up Darling, which is likely to have done and still do far more good than bad, even if the fiction affects reality crowd were 100% correct with their asinine assumption. Especially as My Dress Up Darling doesn't even push anything that is inappropriate insofar as the relationship between Marin and Gojo is concerned. And that's the sad and frustrating thing about this whole line of argument. My Dress Up Darling is a phenomenal teen love story that talks about being able to be yourself and enjoy being passionate about a hobby. In no way does it actually push a relationship that isn't 100% kosher. Getting lost and clutching pearls over Marin in a bathing suit in one scene is so dramatically missing the point that for this fact alone, this kind of criticism should be dismissed. It isn't even as if the show portrays Marin and Gojo in some sort of dangerous relationship. Your problem effectively comes down to the fact that you have issues with people viewing it because you yourself equate this fictional character to a real person. And if you think that's going to sway people, then the actual message of the series is going to do far more good. The characters are the exact same age, and they never do anything that could really be deemed super inappropriate, and they are both very supportive and very good to each other. It is a completely healthy relationship. In terms of anime, unless you are mentally ill or willfully ignorant, you can see the portrayal as separate from reality. And unless the media is trying to push some very pro-Diddy/Epstein alliance kind of stuff, the way a certain French film attempted to do, you can't actually say it's a bad thing. If your argument hinges on taking a singular element out of an entire product and focusing on that, as if there isn't a massive narrative reason for it to exist, you've got no grounds to stand on. Taken as a whole, My Dress-Up Darling pushes a romance that is nothing but ideal. A very wholesome and healthy love between two people who happen to share a hobby and attend the same class. So I can confidently say that it is benign content, and that likening people who create or consume a series like My Dress-Up Darling to actual child predators is what does more harm than anything within the series. I mean, not only are you now watering down the concept behind the accusation and the sting it rightfully should carry towards the lowest dregs of society, you are also inadvertently nuking most anime with this argument regardless of the kind of portrayal they go for. Spamming problematic or pedophile at people over things that are as benign as an animated young love story only serves to make anyone involved in the conversation numb to the accusation. Much like the way we as a society spammed fascist, racist, bigot, homophobe, transphobe, and literal Nazi into the ground over the past decade for the most pointless things because we wanted to insult or dunk on the others we hate. If you use the word so flippantly, eventually people are less averse to it. Rather than reacting with disgust as one would to a certain island boy or party animal, people will begin to hear the word and think, oh, they're probably raging about the short-of-age working woman again. And that's the biggest issue I have with this. And this is an effect I have observed with my own eyes. People have grown so numb to the above accusations because they became associated with entirely benign things. They were so overused, a lot of people just shrugged them off as Karens on the internet bitching them out over stupid shit. That process is more responsible for the normalization of Kanye stuff or Diddy stuff than anything else, I posit. And to be frank, I don't condone hating on broad groups, okay? I am just pointing out that if you call everything racist, suddenly racism means nothing. And the same will happen with the term pedophile. And I loathe that thought. I don't want that word to lose its sting. It should, and rightfully so, be something that makes people react with revulsion. That just runs right into the very idea of dubbing fiction pedophilic. Sure, there are some things that make me uncomfortable. There are some lines that I do have myself. Things that I find questionable, or, to talk like the hip kids, give me the ick. Summer Anime released a series called Cultural Exchange with a Game Center Girl, in which there was a questionable choice in romantic tension between a 14-year-old and an adult college student, and it makes no significant attempt to suggest that Renji will reject the girl. It leaves things completely undefined at the end of the season. In the real world, this would absolutely be considered a no-no. It's something that, adult people shouldn't be doing. You don't get involved with teenagers like that. In fiction, it just makes me a bit uncomfortable. I have less aversion to it. Why? Specifically because it is fiction. It isn't real. But do I think that it needs to be completely illegal or that people should be prosecuted for watching it? No. I believe firmly that fiction should be allowed to broach uncomfortable topics. And artists should have the liberty to do a good number of things for their series, even if many would consider them uncouth or degenerate. Now, like I said, I have lines, but sometimes those things play an important role in a bigger theme of the series. Take Berserk, where you have a lot of things that in real life would be absolutely disgusting, but for the sake of this series, it goes to show just how horrible Guts' life was up to a certain point, or well, rather, all the way through it. Besides, it isn't as if someone is going to watch Cultural Exchange with a Game Center Girl and suddenly think, the age of consent should be lower. Unless you're getting up to something particularly nasty, I don't have a problem outside of just not liking it. That certain French film comes to mind when we talk about crossing lines, because there's a whole lot more than just some girl in a bikini. Making a whole movie about the sexual liberation of preteen girls is a bridge too far for me, okay, Captain? But in general, just because someone writes or reads something doesn't mean they automatically want to partake of those things in real life. A person's fictional tastes or fictional creations is an inconsistent reflection of who they are. For an example, in this vein, Hayao Miyazaki creates a lot of happy-looking and endearing stories, things that people think are classics from their childhood. In real life, he's kind of a prick by all accounts I've heard. On the opposite end of the spectrum, some people who create dark, terrible, horrid worlds and gritty fiction are actually really nice people and amiable people who'd be hard-pressed to hurt a fly. And if a topic makes you uncomfortable, you're well within your rights to not like it. Nobody should be saying you have to like My Dress-Up Darling. That's not at all the case. However, suggesting that someone wants to do not nice things to children because they enjoyed an anime about someone finding people who support their hobbies is the most bad faith kind of argument you could come up with. If that's you, kindly see yourself out the door.
I can't sew, but I can cook and do house stuff.
And you're sure you're okay? You get enough nutrition from that stuff?
In closing, there should be very few circumstances where we are resorting to calling each other the worst kinds of people over fiction. Very rarely do I think that you can make a case that something goes too far. My statements about artists being allowed the liberty to be uncouth or degenerate, as I tried to make clear, has limits. I think once your messaging crosses the line, then and there you can say, alright, maybe this is bad. Maybe we shouldn't be saying something like this. Another one of those lines is drawing real people being subjected to physical or sexual violence. In this case, I don't see any excuses for such behavior. On the other hand, artists still should have the liberty to tackle hard-hitting subjects or their own deeply personal issues. Berserk has some pretty terrible things to show. Why? Because it depicts demonic entities as evil beings, and displaying abject evil in such a visceral and direct way has the desired impact of making the reader uncomfortable. You're supposed to loathe some of the things that happen. You're supposed to loathe some of the characters. That is the intended effect. Similarly, the content people will complain about in My Dress-Up Darling serves a purpose. And really, it often comes down to just the fact that Maureen is physically attractive. She is beautiful. She does look good. Maureen's flippancy, though, with how she shows herself off to Gojo, actually does have that literary purpose. And it plays into a much larger story that doesn't actually say anything at all about condoning lowering age of consent or touching kids. I mean, not only does it tie into their relationship, but it also ties into the core message of not being ashamed of yourself or your hobbies. Maureen isn't afraid, because she's focused on what she loves, and she has this experience already. And again, the show in no way makes her an easy girl or someone who is pursuing a dangerous relationship. Trying to make the whole thing something about making women objects or something even nastier misses massive parts of what the author is attempting to convey. If you look at what the anime actually promotes through its writing, it's far from being anything about attending parties or visiting islands. In fact, you would be very, very hard-pressed to draw that out of this series without specifically hyper-focusing one element of it. But most importantly in all of this, you aren't actually doing any good with this behavior. Again, not only is someone's taste in fiction an inconsistent indicator of who they are, but talking about Maureen like she needs to be saved ignores the idea that she's not even real. I don't like to be that guy who goes to whataboutisms and arguments. But whatever connection you can try to make between anime and child sex crimes pales in comparison to any number of problems you could be using that energy for. Well, assuming you're actually taking any action and not just screaming out on the internet for clout without actually making an attempt to change the world. And that's kind of the point I want to drive home. What you are doing is not actually solving any problems, or saving any lives, or making the world even marginally better in any way. In fact, in complaining about a very wholesome anime, you're really only grandstanding for your own satisfaction and broadcasting your lobotomized opinions to the rest of the world so that other lobotomites can seal clap for you. Congrats, you got a dopamine hit from the like button getting hit a bunch of times, but you've not done anything worthwhile. You can sit in your chair and pretend to care about an issue, clutch pearls to get your moral kicks out of virtue signaling to the internet, and then continue on with your life without actually taking any action to solve the problem. And in the end, your empty words do nothing but water down a term as you spam it at otherwise normal people who like fiction you don't care for and have no ability to evaluate, while conveniently ignoring all the times the other things that you do like, which could be criticized by the same metrics you use, do things. Am I being rude here? Hell yes, because this part of the anime fandom frustrates me to high heaven. You're trying to pretend like you're some hero because you can go, oh, but she's 15, as if that means anything about a piece of fiction, you fuck. Here's food for thought for you. The manga is over. Maureen is an adult at that point. Fair game. And you know what you haven't done in all of this bitching you've done on the internet to each and every one of you who has complained about fictional characters and the way that they are represented? Saved an actual person from anything, you mongoloids. So go ahead, clutch pearls, seal clap for each other, and get in your little Discord groups and dox people. I've heard your accusations 100 times by now, and I've seen what you cheer for, you fuckers. Your boos mean nothing to me. But to those of you who are actually on my side, I'll assume you enjoyed the video if you're in this far, or you're just, ready to criticize me for saying something wrong. But if it actually is the case that you enjoyed this, I would hope that you would leave a like and a comment about your thoughts on all of this. And if you enjoy anime content from a pretentious, know-it-all asshole like me, then subscribe. This certainly won't be my last video essay, and I even have full reviews of seasonal anime as well as weekend live streams talking about seasonals and stuff. In whatever form you decide to support me, I appreciate it. It truly means a lot to me that you have listened to what I have to say for this long. That said, I hope I can catch you in another one later.